The creative compromise. Young people fret and fume when they hear the word compromise. Elders groan. Compromise is but inevitable. There is a strong notion that to compromise is to curb one's freedom, to give up dreams. The virtues of compromise are often ignored. We are reluctant to understand its nuances. A new world would dawn if the art of compromise is practiced in our day-to-daily lives. To understand the nature of compromise, let us recount an episode from our history. In 1917, Mahatma Gandhi visited Champaran in Bihar to look into the farming-related problems faced by the peasants due to the European planters. The planters extracted high rents, illegal taxes, and also forced farmers to sell crops at the rates dictated by them. Gandhiji took statements from thousands of peasants and compiled their grievances. With courage and patience, he could convince the then British rulers to appoint an official commission to inquire into the peasants' condition, with Gandhiji as a member. Unable to deny the voluminous evidence gathered by the commission, the European planters agreed to refund the illegally extracted money to the peasants. The planters felt uneasy that they may be asked to pay the entire money. Gandhiji asked for a return of half the amount. Assuming that he would be adamant, the representative of the planters proposed that they would return much less than the half. To their surprise, Gandhiji agreed with him and bought a quick settlement. Later, he explained the compromise to the peasants. According to him, the fact that the planters parted with their prestige was more significant than the amount they refunded. He wanted the essence more than substance. From this episode, we can have an insight that the compromise is giving up less important things to pave way for the greater happenings. By using the weapon of compromise, Gandhiji made the planters realize that they too were bound by the rules of the land, and the peasants could as well as claim their rights. In order to compromise, we must know what is essential and what is not. For many of us, our likes and dislikes are of greatest importance. Our perspective is the only proper perspective. When others acknowledge our importance, we feel successful. Compromise threatens these self-identities and hence is bitter. This is true in the cases of personal relationships, individuals working for organizations, and sometimes for organizations as a whole. Placing higher ideals above our petty self-interest, having a broader perspective, acknowledging others' priorities, working under men of greater vision. All these are need to compromise in a creative manner. Now, we will sit at the holy feet of Hanumanji to learn lessons in the art of compromise. Sugriva called up Vanara heroes like Angada, Hanuman, Jambavan, Gaja, Gavaksha, Sushena, and others. He teamed them up and assigned Angada as their chief leader. Later, Sugriva lavishly praised Hanuman that he could succeed in every mission. Inspired by Sugriva's confidence in him, Sri Rama gave his ring to Hanuman to give it to Sita Devi. Here was a typical situation for Hanuman. Angada was young and inexperienced. He was yet to earn the trust of his king. Hanuman was loyal, efficient, and effective. Sugriva had faith in his abilities. Yet, as per instructions of Sugriva, he was to work under the guidance of Angada. Hanuman did not resent. He did not withhold his abilities. He provided advice whenever it was needed. Reminded by Jambavan, he assumed his mighty form, crossed the ocean, and located Mother Sita. In the end, he returned from Lanka and reported everything to Angada and other seniors and asked him to decide the future course. It is also interesting to observe Jambavan's rule. He wisely reminded Hanuman of his greatness. He gave timely suggestions to Angada. He used his maturity and wisdom for the success of the team. Characters like Hanuman and Jambavan stand up for their team and its objectives. They are not distracted by their relatively lower position in the team. They don't cringe to share their single-handed achievements with the entire team. They do not suffer from the burden of self-glorification. They are clear about the objectives of the team. They do not hesitate to compromise their individual needs to attain the larger collective goals. And should we not compromise? Sri Lal Bahadur Shastri was Prime Minister of India. At that time, there was a severe shortage of food in the country. He inaugurated schemes which led to Green Revolution and White Revolution in India. Having asked his family to cook a single meal every day for a week, he gave a call to the citizens of the nation to skip at least one meal per week. There were skirmishes at the borders. Soon the issues escalated, and in a speech to the Parliament, he declared that we would prefer to live in poverty for as long as necessary, but we shall not allow our freedom to be subverted. Even his opponents were surprised at his uncompromising and fearless attitude. He was as tender as a flower, yet strong as a diamond. We can also remind ourselves the famous speech of Abraham Lincoln, in which he said, "Let us have the faith that right makes might, and in that faith let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it." We can as well as recollect with the reverence that the poet Saint Potana never composed poetry for wealth or for the fear of kings. His poetry was offered to the divinity. All these great people lived for principles. They gladly compromised less things to attain lofty ideals. At individual level, when we attempt to compromise in our everyday issues with people around, we begin to analyze our own priorities. Are we too particular about the taste of our food? Do we become restless if we miss our regular entertainment? Do we care to give up some expenses on ourselves and brighten up others' lives? Are we irked by the other person's behavior? Time to practice the art of creative compromise. By practicing compromise, we can recognize our obsessions, smooth off our rigid behaviors, and enhance our sensitivities. Opportunities to compromise come to us in our day-to-day lives. We can practice virtues like affection for others, forbearance and firmness while we strive to compromise. Our self-awareness increases when we observe the grounds on which we compromise. If it is easy for us to compromise on our ideals, it must be easier to compromise on our likes and dislikes. We have to pay attention to the battles of compromise that rage into our minds. We have to work for those taken for granted notions that we carry, those stubborn habits that rule us, those mistaken self-identities. We must give a hearing to those tiny inner voices which reveal us what our real needs are, and let those guide us when we have to compromise. When we compromise, we transcend our rigid, gross ego. Our deeds become a worship of divinity in and around us. Many times, compromise is a harsh reality. We have to decide when to flow along with it and when to struggle against it. The guiding parameters are self-improvement and service to others. Sometimes to compromise is to fail. However, such failures do not go waste if we can turn into a better human being. Observing the lives of great men and women, studying the scriptures guided by an acharya, analyzing and implementing them in our day-to-day lives would teach us the nuances of compromise. A creative compromise cuts through each one, hurts none, and heals everyone.